He hired her to take care of his daughter. What he didn't plan for was his daughter taking one look at her on the very first day and saying, with the devastating certainty of a 6-year-old who knows things adults have forgotten, "Daddy, she's the one who's going to fix us." Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. If you're tuned in and ready to dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another exciting story you definitely don't want to miss. So, let's get started. The house that forgot how to be warm. The job listing had been posted for 11 days before Marisol Avery found it. She wasn't looking for it specifically. She'd been browsing the childcare placement board with the particular focused desperation of someone whose rent was due in 9 days, and whose last position had ended not through any fault of her own, but through the sudden relocation of the family she'd worked for to Portland, Oregon, which they'd mentioned with approximately 2 weeks' notice, and the cheerful obliviousness of people who have never had to worry about where next month's rent was coming from. She'd been good at that job. Genuinely good, not in the professional resume bullet point way, though she was that too, but in the way that actually matters when you're responsible for small humans. Patient, warm, endlessly inventive on rainy days, and possessed of the particular gift of being able to enter a child's world completely without condescension or performance. She had a degree in early childhood education from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She had 4 years of experience, 3 excellent references, and a genuine, uncomplicated love for children that she'd never had to manufacture. What she did not have was a plan B. The listing stopped her mid-scroll. Private household seeks experienced, professional full-time nanny for 1 child, female, age 6. Position based in Charleston, South Carolina. Live-in preferred. Competitive compensation package. Candidate must be emotionally mature, professionally boundaried, and comfortable in a quiet household environment. References required. NDA required. Discretion non-negotiable. She read it twice. The language was careful in a way that told her things the words didn't say directly. Quiet household. Emotionally mature. Discretion non-negotiable. This was not a family looking for someone to organize playdates and pack lunches. This was a household that had been through something and needed someone who understood the weight of that without being told. She clicked the application link. She told herself it was the compensation, which was, in fact, extraordinary, listed as a range that made her blink and reread and blink again. But it was also the 6-year-old girl at the center of it, unnamed in the listing but present in every careful word, the real subject of every professional requirement listed around her. Marisol had learned to read job listings the way she read children, not for what they said but for what they were protecting. This one was protecting a little girl. She submitted her application at 11:47 p.m., sitting cross-legged on her Chicago apartment floor with her laptop balanced on a textbook and the city doing its patient midnight thing outside her window. She heard back in 6 hours. The man who responded was not the father. His name was Gregory Aldis, an attorney, she gathered from the email signature, though he didn't specify in whose employ. His email was precise and impersonal and requested 3 things: her full references, her availability for a video call within 48 hours, and confirmation that she had read and was willing to sign a preliminary NDA before any further details of the position were disclosed. She confirmed all 3. The video call happened Thursday morning. Gregory Aldis was 60, silver-haired, and had the particular quality of someone who has spent decades in the service of someone else's life and has made his peace with that. He asked her questions for 40 minutes, not about her resume, which he'd clearly read thoroughly, but about her philosophy. How she handled grief in children. How she established trust with a child who had experienced loss. How she maintained professional boundaries in a household environment without allowing those boundaries to become coldness. She answered honestly, completely, without the performance of an interview. She'd learned early that the best childcare positions went to people who told the truth about who they were, because children find out immediately anyway. At the end of 40 minutes, Gregory Aldis said, "Mr. Whitmore would like to meet you in person. We'll fly you to Charleston at our expense. If after the meeting you decide the position isn't right for you, we'll compensate you for your time regardless." "Who is Mr. Whitmore?" she asked. A brief pause. "Everett Whitmore," Gregory said. "I assume you're familiar with the name." She was Everett Whitmore was 41 years old and was the founder and CEO of Whitmore Development Group, one of the largest real estate development companies in the American Southeast. He'd built it from a single commercial property in Charleston at 26 to a multi-state operation that had reshaped the skylines of 4 cities. He was, by any measure, one of the most successful men in South Carolina, and had been, until 3 years ago, one of the most photographed at galas, at ribbon cuttings, at the kind of charitable events that wealthy people attend in the American South with the combination of genuine community investment and careful social maintenance. 3 years ago, the photographs had stopped. She knew why. It had been in the news briefly, not sensationalized, just reported, the way genuine tragedy is when it involves a private person who happens to be publicly prominent. His wife, Claire Whitmore, had died of an aggressive cancer diagnosis 14 months after detection. She was 36. Their daughter Lily had been 3 years old. Marisol had not connected the listing to Everett Whitmore. The listing had been deliberately anonymous. She sat with the information for a moment, not recalibrating her interest, but understanding it more completely. A widowed father. A 6-year-old girl who had lost her mother at 3. A quiet house. Emotionally mature. Discretion non-negotiable. "I'm familiar with the name," she said to Gregory Aldous. "Good," he said. "We'll send you the travel details." Charleston in early September was warm and heavy with the particular beauty of the American South in late summer. The air thick with honeysuckle and the smell of the Cooper River, the old city going about its unhurried business under Spanish moss and late afternoon gold. Marisol had never been to Charleston. She'd grown up in Evanston, Illinois, the daughter of a Mexican-American nurse and a high school football coach, in a house that was loud and warm and full of the comfortable noise of people who loved each other without ceremony. Charleston felt, to her Midwestern sensibility, like a different country. Slower, more deliberate, beautiful in a way that had been accumulating for centuries. The Whitmore estate was 20 minutes outside the city proper. A colonial revival house set back from a private road, white-columned and wide-porched, surrounded by live oaks so old they seemed less like trees and more like architecture. It was magnificent and immaculate, and she understood immediately upon arriving, profoundly, specifically sad. Not in its appearance. Everything was perfectly maintained, the gardens tended, the white paint fresh, but in the quality of its quiet. The way a beautiful house can be in perfect condition and still communicate, to the right kind of attention, that something essential has gone out of it. She was shown to a sitting room by a housekeeper named Beverly, a warm, broad-shouldered woman in her 50s who looked at Marisol with the particular assessment of someone who has been in the house long enough to love the people in it and is very careful about who else comes in. "Mr. Whitmore will be down shortly," Beverly said, and then, quieter, with the directness of someone who has decided in the last 30 seconds to be honest. "She's a good little girl. She just needs—" Beverly stopped, selected the word carefully. "Warmth," she said. "The house needs warmth." Before Marisol could respond, she heard footsteps on the stairs. The Whitmore estate was 20 minutes outside the city proper. A colonial revival house set back from a private road, white-columned and wide-porched, surrounded by live oaks so old they seemed less like trees and more like architecture. It was magnificent and immaculate, and she understood immediately upon arriving, profoundly, specifically sad. Not in its appearance. Everything was perfectly maintained, the gardens tended, the white paint fresh, but in the quality of its quiet. The way a beautiful house can be in perfect condition and still communicate, to the right kind of attention, that something essential has gone out of it. She was shown to a sitting room by a housekeeper named Beverly, a warm, broad-shouldered woman in her 50s who looked at Marisol with the particular assessment of someone who has been in the house long enough to love the people in it and is very careful about who else comes in. "Mr. Whitmore will be down shortly," Beverly said, and then, quieter, with the directness of someone who has decided in the last 30 seconds to be honest. "She's a good little girl. She just needs—" Beverly stopped, selected the word carefully. "Warmth," she said. "The house needs warmth." Before Marisol could respond, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Everett Whitmore was not what she'd expected. She'd seen the professional photographs, the gala images, the ribbon cuttings, the confident public face of a man in full command of his world. She'd expected some version of that. What came down the stairs was something more honest and considerably more human. A tall man in dark trousers and a pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, dark hair with the first threads of gray at the temples, and a face that had clearly once been easy with expression and had learned, over 3 years of hard weather, to hold itself carefully. He was still handsome. She noted this the way you note weather as a fact about the world, but the handsomeness was secondary to something else, something that struck her more immediately. He looked tired in the way that has nothing to do with sleep. The specific exhaustion of someone who has been strong for a long time and has forgotten what it felt like before that was required. "Ms. Avery," he said. His voice was low, measured, a slight Carolina cadence underneath the professional control. He extended his hand. "Mr. Whitmore," she said. She shook it. His grip was firm, his hand warm, and he looked at her with dark eyes that were doing what she recognized as a thorough, careful assessment. Not unkind, just serious. The look of a man for whom this decision was not professional but personal in the most fundamental way. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Please sit down." They sat across from each other in the sitting room. Cream walls, good furniture, a fireplace that had been laid but not lit, fresh flowers on the mantel that Beverly had clearly placed that morning. Through the tall windows, the late afternoon light came gold through the oaks. "Gregory tells me your background is excellent," he said. "I hope so," she said simply. A slight pause. He looked at her, recalibrating slightly, she thought, at the absence of the professional performance he'd perhaps expected. "Tell me about your last position," he said. She told him. Honestly, completely, the family, the children, the 2 years, the abrupt relocation. She told him what she'd done well and the one time, in year 1, when she'd misjudged a situation and how she'd corrected it. She didn't sand the edges. He listened with full attention. She noticed that he was very still when he listened, no phone, no distraction, the complete focus of someone who has learned that the most important information is often in what people choose to include without being asked. "Why did you apply for this position?" he said. "Specifically, you had other options on that board." She considered the honest answer. "The listing," she said. "The way it was written. I could tell it was about protecting someone. And she paused. "I'm good at that. Not in the professional boundary sense, though I am that too. But genuinely, it's the part of the work that matters most to me." He was quiet for a moment. Something moved in his face. Not quite emotion, but its shadow. "I have one non-negotiable," he said. "Tell me," she said. "Lily comes first," he said. "Not the household, not my schedule, not anyone's convenience. If there is ever a conflict between what is best for my daughter and what is convenient for any other aspect of this position." He held her gaze. "Lily comes first. Always." She looked at him, at the absolute bedrock certainty in his face when he said his daughter's name. The tiredness was still there, the careful holding, the 3 years of hard weather. But underneath all of it, unmistakable and complete, was the love of a father who had decided that whatever else he lost, he would not lose his child to the grief that had taken so much else. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "that's not a non-negotiable. That's the job description." He looked at her for a moment, and something in his face, just for a second, just at the edges, released. Then footsteps on the stairs. Small ones, quick and light. And a 6-year-old girl appeared in the doorway of the sitting room in a yellow dress with her dark hair in 2 uneven pigtails. Uneven because she'd done them herself, Marisol gauged immediately, and no one had corrected them, and the not correcting was somehow the most heartbreaking detail in the room. She had her father's dark eyes. She looked at Marisol with the direct, unfiltered assessment of a child who has learned to read adults carefully and trusts her own conclusions. Then she crossed the room, climbed up onto the sofa beside her father, and looked at Marisol with those serious dark eyes. "Are you going to be my nanny?" she asked. "I might be," Marisol said, "if you think that would be okay." Lily considered this with the gravity of a UN negotiator. Then she looked up at her father. "Daddy," she said, with the devastating certainty of a 6-year-old who knows things adults have forgotten. "She's the one who's going to fix us." The room went very still. Everett Whitmore looked at his daughter. Then he looked at Marisol. and the careful, controlled face did something it clearly hadn't done in a long time. Something that moved through it like light through water, brief and complete. He looked away quickly, cleared his throat, looked back with the professional composure reinstated, mostly. "The position is yours if you want it," he said. Marisol looked at the little girl in the yellow dress with the uneven pigtails. "I want it," she said. "We already know this little girl is going to be everything, and we need to hear from you right now. Drop a comment below. What was the moment in this first act that got you? Was it Beverly's one word? Lily's pigtails? Or those 4 words at the end? Tell us, we read every single one." She moved in on a Sunday. Not because Sunday was logistically significant, but because Beverly had suggested it. Quietly, while walking Marisol to her car after the interview, with the practical wisdom of someone who understood the rhythms of the house better than anyone. "Come on a Sunday," Beverly had said. "The week hasn't started yet. The house is slower on Sundays. It'll give you and Miss Lily time to find each other before everything else begins." Marisol had understood immediately what Beverly meant by find each other. Not introduce, not orient. Find, the word of someone who believed that certain connections were less about arrangement and more about recognition. She arrived at 10 in the morning with 2 suitcases, a box of books, and a small potted succulent she'd had for 3 years and carried with her between apartments the way some people carry photographs. Beverly met her at the door. Everett Whitmore did not. He was in his study, Beverly explained, with the particular neutrality of someone delivering information without editorializing. He worked on Sundays. He worked on most days. The study door was closed by 7 a.m. and frequently stayed that way until dinner, and sometimes past dinner, and Beverly's neutrality on this subject had the quality of someone who had feelings about it and had decided, professionally, not to have them out loud. Lily, however, was on the front porch. She was sitting on the top step in denim overalls and bare feet, with a book open in her lap that she was clearly not reading because she'd been watching the driveway since approximately the moment Marisol's car had turned through the gate. When the car stopped, she stood up with the barely contained energy of a child who has been instructed to wait and has been finding that instruction genuinely difficult. Marisol got out of the car. Lily looked at her suitcases, then at the box, then at the succulent. "What's that?" she said, pointing at the plant. "That's Gerald," Marisol said. Lily considered this. "That's a funny name for a plant. He has a funny personality," Marisol said seriously. "He doesn't need much water and he doesn't apologize for it." Lily stared at her for a moment. Then she giggled. A real one, unguarded and bright. The kind of laugh that a child produces when something has genuinely surprised them into joy. It was, Marisol thought, the best sound she'd heard in months, and she filed it away in the place she kept things that mattered. "I'll help with the box," Lily said, with the authority of someone who has decided the relationship has officially begun. "I was hoping you'd say that," Marisol said. The room they'd prepared for her was on the 2nd floor. Large, simply furnished, with windows that looked out over the back garden and the old oaks beyond. Someone had put fresh flowers on the dresser. She suspected Beverly. She appreciated it more than she said. Lily sat on the bed while Marisol unpacked, a position she assumed with the natural ease of a child who has decided that this room is now also, in some important sense, hers. "Do you know how to make pancakes?" Lily asked. "I do," Marisol said, folding a sweater into the drawer. "Beverly's pancakes are flat," Lily said, with the diplomatic gravity of someone delivering a verdict they've been sitting on for some time. "I don't tell her because her feelings would be hurt, but they're flat." "I'll remember that," Marisol said seriously. "Do you know any songs?" "Several." "Do you know any good ones?" "That depends on your definition of good," Marisol said, turning from the dresser. "What's yours?" Lily thought about it with her whole face, the focused, total consideration of a child for whom this was a genuine philosophical question. "Songs that feel like something," she said finally. "Not just words." Marisol looked at this 6-year-old girl, at the dark eyes and the serious face and the enormous, careful heart that was so plainly visible in every unguarded word she said, and felt the particular, specific ache of someone recognizing a child who has been navigating an adult-sized grief in a 6-year-old body. "Yes," she said, "I know some of those." Good, Lily said, satisfied, and jumped off the bed to go examine Gerald more closely. The first week had the careful texture of people learning a new language together. Marisol learned the house, its rhythms, its rules, its silences. Breakfast at 7:30. Lily's school, a small private academy 6 miles away, started at 8:15. Pick up at 3. Lily liked her grilled cheese cut diagonally, not straight across, a preference she held with quiet but absolute conviction. She was afraid of the dark in a specific way, not generally, just the particular dark of the hallway outside her room, which Marisol addressed on day 2 by finding a small star-shaped nightlight in a drawer in the kitchen and plugging it in without announcement. And Lily had looked at it that evening with an expression of such relieved gratitude that it nearly broke Marisol's heart. She learned Lily's world. The stuffed rabbit named Professor that had been with her since infancy, currently missing his left ear from an incident Lily described as an accident involving scissors that I don't want to talk about yet. The drawings Lily kept in a folder under her bed. Not random children's drawings but careful, deliberate ones, the same subject repeated in different versions. A woman with dark hair and a yellow dress, always smiling, always with her arms open. Marisol recognized immediately who it was and said nothing and simply looked for a moment before putting the folder back exactly as she'd found it. She learned, by the end of the first week, the shape of Everett Whitmore's absence. He was present, technically, physically, in the house, but his presence had the quality of something kept at careful distance. He came down for breakfast when Lily was already at the table and left for his downtown office before Marisol had finished her coffee. He texted Gregory about the day's schedule. He attended Lily's bedtime. Always, without exception, this was the one thing he never missed. Appearing in the doorway of Lily's room at 7:30 with his jacket off and his tie loosened and sitting on the edge of her bed for 30 minutes that were, Marisol gathered from Beverly, the truest part of his day. But the hours between breakfast and bedtime were managed. Efficient. The hours of a man who had organized his life around the grief rather than through it. Marisol did not editorialize. She observed. She was patient by nature and professional by discipline, and she understood that the work she was here to do was first for Lily, and that everything else was not her business unless it was invited to be. She made pancakes on Saturday morning. The real kind, thick, from scratch, with blueberries from the farmer's market Beverly had mentioned was worth the drive. She made enough for 4. She put a plate outside the study door with a glass of orange juice and went back to the kitchen without knocking. 20 minutes later, the plate was empty outside the door. She brought it back to the kitchen and said nothing about it to anyone. The following Saturday, she made them again. Same thing, plate outside the door, juice, no knock. The plate came back empty. The third Saturday, she was at the stove when she heard the study door open. Footsteps in the hall. She did not turn around. Everett Whitmore came into the kitchen, in dark jeans and a gray t-shirt, the most casual she'd seen him and also the most tired, and sat down at the kitchen island without saying anything. He looked at the stove, at the pancakes, at the blueberries she'd set in a small bowl beside the batter. "You don't have to leave a plate outside the door," he said. His voice had the slight roughness of a man who hasn't spoken yet this morning. "I know," she said. She flipped a pancake. "Lily likes company at breakfast. I make extra." Pause. "Is that the reason?" "That's one of them," she said evenly. She set a plate in front of him. He looked at it. He picked up his fork. They ate in the kitchen in the early morning quiet. Lily still asleep upstairs. The oaks outside the window holding the low September light. He didn't make conversation. She didn't require it. They simply occupied the same warm room together, which was, she had found, sometimes the most honest thing two people can do. When he finished, he looked at his empty plate for a moment. Then at her. "They're not flat," he said. She pressed her lips together to contain the smile. "No," she said. "They're not." He stood. He picked up his plate and put it in the sink himself. A detail so small and so telling that she noted it quietly. Then he went back down the hall toward his study, and the door closed, and the house settled back into its careful quiet. Beverly, who had been absolutely nowhere in evidence during any of this, appeared in the kitchen doorway 30 seconds later with the expression of someone who has been listening from the hallway and has chosen not to be embarrassed about it. "Well," Beverly said, in a tone of profound satisfaction. Don't, Marisol said. I didn't say a word, Beverly said, and poured herself coffee. Lily bloomed the way children do when they feel genuinely safe. Not all at once, but steadily, each day a little more of her actual self visible, like a room with more lights coming on. By the third week, she was talking constantly. By the fourth, she had developed a full and elaborate mythology around Gerald the Succulent, who had apparently, in Lily's imagination, a rich interior life and strong opinions about the weather. By the end of the first month, she had taken to appearing in Marisol's doorway in the mornings before school, fully dressed, with her hair needing to be done and Professor the Rabbit under one arm, and simply standing there until Marisol said come in then, at which point she would climb up onto the bed and submit to having her hair braided with the resigned dignity of someone accepting a necessary process. The braids were Marisol's doing. She was good at them, had grown up braiding her younger cousin's hair, and she did Lily's each morning with a care that was partly practical and partly something more than that. Lily had inherited her father's dark hair, thick and slightly wavy, and Marisol braided it neatly every day, and Lily went to school looking like someone was paying attention, which she was, which they were. One morning in October, Everett was coming down the stairs as Lily was going up. Post-braid, Professor under her arm, backpack already on. He stopped on the landing and looked at her, at the braids, at his daughter, who looked cared for in a way that was visible and specific and had not been visible and specific in a long time. He didn't say anything to Lily. He kissed her forehead and let her go. But at the bottom of the stairs, he paused at the kitchen doorway where Marisol was packing Lily's lunch. "Thank you," he said. Just that. She looked up. He was looking at her with those dark eyes. Not the professional assessment of the interview, not the managed distance of the first 3 weeks. Something more direct. Something that had come from a real place without being planned. "Of course," she said simply. He nodded once and went back down the hall. Beverly, materializing from nowhere as was apparently her gift, put a hand briefly on Marisol's shoulder as she passed and said nothing at all. It was a Tuesday in the second month that things shifted. Marisol had picked Lily up from school as usual, and they'd come home to find the power out in half the house. A minor electrical issue, Beverly explained. The electrician was coming tomorrow. The study, where Everett was working from home that day, was unaffected. The kitchen was not. Marisol improvised. She spread a blanket on the living room floor and constructed what she told Lily was a world-class indoor picnic, which involved sandwiches and apple slices, and the good crackers Beverly kept for guests, and a flashlight shaped like a moon that she'd found in the emergency drawer. She lit 4 candles on the coffee table and put on a playlist from her phone, and they sat on the blanket in the October afternoon with their picnic and Lily's drawings and Professor, and the very comfortable noise of 2 people who had figured out how to be easy with each other. She was helping Lily with a drawing, a house with a garden very detailed with specific attention to the flowers, when she looked up and found Everett standing in the living room doorway. He'd come for a glass of water from the kitchen, she imagined, and had encountered this instead. His living room floor covered in blanket and candlelight, and the comfortable domestic happiness of his daughter lying on her stomach with her feet in the air, drawing flowers with the tip of her tongue between her teeth in concentration, the sound of music low from a phone on the coffee table. He stood in the doorway with his empty glass and looked at it. Lily looked up. "Daddy, we made a picnic. Come sit." He looked at the blanket, at the candles, at Marisol, who was watching him with the calm, open expression of someone who is not going to make this awkward unless he does. "There's room," Marisol said simply. He looked at the blanket for a moment longer. Then he set his glass on the end table and lowered himself, somewhat carefully, onto the floor. A tall man in a tailored shirt sitting cross-legged on a living room blanket with a flashlight moon and 4 candles and his daughter already climbing into his lap before he'd fully settled. He sat, and something in the room changed temperature. Not dramatically, no announcement, no moment. Just the quiet shift of a space that had been holding its breath becoming, simply and completely, a room where a family was sitting on the floor in candlelight on a Tuesday afternoon. Lily put his hand on her drawing. "You be the garden," she said authoritatively. "I'll try," he said. Marisol handed him a red crayon. He looked at it for a moment, at this small, ordinary object in his large hand, and then he started to draw carefully the way he did everything. Lily immediately began directing him with cheerful specificity, and he followed her instructions with the focused, earnest attention of a man who has been given one job that actually matters. Marisol watched them for a moment. This father and his daughter on a blanket in candlelight, drawing a garden together, and felt something move through her chest that she recognized and was not yet ready to name. She looked back at her own drawing. After a while, Lily fell asleep between them, simply and completely, the way children do when they feel absolutely safe, curled on the blanket with Professor under her cheek and her father's jacket that he draped over her at some point without Marisol noticing when. The room was quiet. The candles were lower. The playlist had cycled around to something slow and unhurried. Everett looked at his sleeping daughter for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, "She laughs more." Marisol looked at him. "Than she did before," he said. He wasn't looking at Marisol. He was looking at Lily, his voice low so as not to wake her. "She laughed before. She's always had that in her. But it's—" He paused. Finding the word with the precision she was beginning to understand was characteristic. "Easier now. Comes faster. She doesn't check first." "Check," Marisol said softly. He was quiet for a moment. "After Claire died, she used to look at me before she laughed, to see if it was okay." He stopped. A 3-year-old, checking if it was okay to laugh. Something moved across his face. Grief, real and undisguised. The kind that doesn't perform itself. "She doesn't do that anymore." Marisol was very still. "She's healing," she said carefully. "Children do when they feel safe. When they have consistency and warmth and someone who shows up the same way every day." She paused. "She's extraordinary, Everett. She has so much love in her." He looked up at the use of his name. The first time she'd used it, she realized, since the interview when he'd said "call me Everett" and she'd filed it away for an appropriate moment. This felt like one. He looked at her across the sleeping child between them, in the candlelight of a living room on a Tuesday in October, and there was nothing managed in his face. Nothing kept at careful distance. Just a man sitting on a floor looking at someone who had walked into his broken house and started, quietly and without announcement, putting warmth back into it. "Thank you," he said. And this time it was not the professional gratitude of the hallway. This was something else. Something that came from further down. "She did it herself," Marisol said. "I just showed up." He held her gaze for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then he looked back at Lily, and gently, carefully, as if the motion required his full concentration, he brushed a strand of dark hair from his daughter's sleeping face. Marisol looked at her drawing. Her hand was not entirely steady. She told herself it was the candlelight. Outside, the October night settled over the Charleston Oaks, unhurried and enormous. Inside, a family sat on a living room floor in the warm and the quiet, and something that had been closed for a very long time opened, just slightly, just at the edges, like a door that has been shut against the cold and is now letting in the first thin line of light. This act just rearranged something in our chest, and we need to know it did the same to you. Drop a comment right now. Was it the pancakes outside the study door? The braids? Or that living room floor moment that completely undid you? Tell us below. We are here for every single word you leave us. The problem with warmth, Everett Whitmore was discovering, was that once you let it back in, you remembered what the cold had cost you. November arrived in Charleston quietly. The live oaks darkened and the light went long and golden in the afternoons, and Lily had taken to spending those afternoons in the back garden with Marisol. Drawing, collecting interesting beetles, playing games whose rules existed entirely in Lily's imagination and were explained in real time with cheerful authority. Everett watched them from his study window more than he intended to. He told himself it was incidental. He was at his desk. The window was there. They were in the garden. But he was honest enough with himself to recognize that he was spending considerably more time at the desk near the window and considerably less time at the conference table across the room, and that this was not coincidental. He watched Marisol crouch down to look at whatever Lily was showing her. A beetle, probably, or a particularly compelling rock, with the complete, unperformed attention that he had come to understand was simply how she moved through the world. Not a professional technique. Just her actual self, present and curious and genuinely interested in whatever small thing was being offered. He looked away from the window, went back to his documents. The documents did not hold his attention the way they used to. The guilt arrived, as it always did at night. He had a name for it, privately, never out loud, the inventory. The nightly accounting of what he was feeling and whether he had the right to feel it. He'd loved Claire completely. And after she died, he told himself the completely was spent. That you got one person who could reach that part of you, and he'd had his, and the rest of his life was Lily and work and the manageable surface of being functional. He'd constructed his life around this. He'd believed it. What he had not accounted for was a woman arriving with a succulent named Gerald and braiding his daughter's hair and leaving pancakes outside his door without knocking. Doing all of it without agenda or performance or any apparent awareness that she was quietly dismantling a structure it had taken him 3 years to build. Claire had made him promise in those last weeks one thing above the others. Don't build a fortress, Everett. You know how to do that. Don't. He'd said yes. He'd built it anyway. He lay in the dark and conducted the inventory. And for the first time in 3 years, the inventory came back with something he couldn't file away cleanly. Something that had Marisol's name on it and would not be reasoned into a professional category, no matter how many times he tried. Marisol was not unaware. She'd told herself, firmly and repeatedly, that it was proximity. The literature on this was extensive. The nanny who develops feelings, practically a genre. The situation created conditions practically engineered to produce feelings that had nothing to do with actual compatibility. And she was a professional with clear boundaries and genuine respect for the complexity of this household. And she was not going to be undone by Saturday morning pancakes and a man who listened with his whole self and had the most heartbreaking expression on his face when he watched his daughter sleep. The telling herself helped somewhat. It helped considerably less when Lily, with the unerring instinct of a 6-year-old for the most complicating possible observation, said during braids one evening, "Do you think Daddy is lonely?" Marisol's hands kept moving through Lily's hair. "What makes you ask that?" "He smiles more now," Lily said simply. "Beverly says he used to smile all the time and then he stopped. But he smiles at you." She said it with the direct certainty of someone who has not yet learned to qualify such things. A real one, not pretend. Marisol finished the braid, smoothed it carefully. "Your daddy loves you very much," she said. "And he's working on being okay. It takes time, when you miss someone." Lily turned around on the bed and looked at her with those grave, knowing dark eyes. "I know," she said gently. "I miss Mama too. But missing her doesn't mean we can't have other good things." Pause, simple and complete. "Mama would want us to have good things. Because I know Mama." She slid off the bed, tucked Professor under her arm, and went to brush her teeth with the matter-of-factness of someone who has made their point and considers the matter covered. Marisol sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet. She looked at Gerald on the windowsill. "Don't," she told him. Gerald offered no opinion. The Savannah afternoon happened the 3rd week of November, and it was the moment before the moment, the thing that made the next thing inevitable. Gregory had a client meeting that required Everett's presence. Lily had no school. The meetings ran long and then longer, and the rain came in by 2 o'clock. The thick, unhurried rain of the deep south that settles in and makes the world feel interior and slow. Marisol and Lily found a small bookstore on a cobblestone street in the historic district. Amberlit, warm, smelling of paper and wood and permanence. Lily disappeared into the children's section to conduct her book negotiations. Marisol sat at a table by the rain-streaked window with a cup of tea and waited. She heard the bell above the door and knew without turning who it was. He came and stood beside the table, his jacket damp at the shoulders. He looked out at the rain. "Meeting's done," she said. "Finally." Pause. "I used to bring Claire here." She went very still. He'd never spoken about Claire directly to her. Not like this, not as a subject. She waited. "We found it by accident early on," he said. His voice was level in the way that costs something. "Ducked in from the rain. Spent 3 hours. Spent too much on books." He was quiet for a moment. She'd have liked that Lily found it. "She sounds like someone who paid attention," Marisol said carefully. "She always knew what people needed." His voice did the thing she'd heard before, the controlled fracture, the place where the maintenance showed its seams. She made me promise. Not to close up. Not to. He stopped. She knew I would. The rain came down on the old glass. Did you? Marisol said softly. He looked at her. I did. Something very quiet in his voice now. And then you arrived with Gerald and the pancakes and... The sentence didn't finish. The space between them was very full. Lily appeared from the back of the store, triumphant, holding 4 books and the expression of someone who has successfully renegotiated a treaty. Everett crouched down, examined each book with genuine attention, looked up at his daughter. For it is, he said. Lily beamed. Outside, the Savannah rain came down on the cobblestones, patient and unhurried. Inside, 2 people stood in the amber light with an unfinished sentence between them, holding it carefully, both of them aware that they were very close to the edge of something, and that the only question left was who would be brave enough to step forward first. That unfinished sentence. Tell us in the comments. Did it get you? Because it got us. Drop something below, we read every single word. Chicago in late November was everything Charleston was not. Loud, cold, relentless. The wind coming off Lake Michigan with the particular brutality of a city that has never once apologized for its weather. Marisol felt it the moment they stepped off the plane, and she pulled Lily's coat tighter and Lily announced that Chicago was trying to eat her face, which Everett repeated under his breath with the quiet amusement of a man slowly remembering how to find things funny. His sister's name was Diane. She was 2 years younger than Everett, warmer on first impression, with the same dark eyes and a laugh that arrived easily and often. The version of the Whitmore family that grief had not yet weathered into careful stillness. She met them at the door of her Lincoln Park townhouse with the particular energy of a woman who has been waiting for this visit for 2 years and has strong feelings about it. She hugged Lily first and longest. Then Everett with the specific grip of a sibling who has been worried and is expressing it physically. Then she turned to Marisol. You must be the reason he actually came, Diane said, with the directness of someone who has been briefed by Beverly and has zero intention of pretending otherwise. Diane, Everett said. I'm just saying what's true, Diane said serenely, and brought them inside. The Thanksgiving house was everything the Charleston estate was not, full of noise and motion and the warm chaos of Diane's family. Her husband and their 3 children ranging from 4 to 11, all of whom absorbed Lily immediately into their ecosystem with the generous efficiency of children who need no preamble. Within 20 minutes Lily was upstairs and fully incorporated, her laughter floating down the stairs like something that had always lived there. Everett stood in the kitchen doorway watching the stairs for a moment after the laughter came down. Marisol stood beside him. She found her people, Marisol said. She did, he said quietly, and something in the way he said it, the specific gratitude and grief mixed together, the sound of a man watching his child be happy in a house full of family and feeling both the joy and the sharp edge of everything that had made such houses feel impossible for 3 years, made Marisol look away and find something to do with her hands. Thanksgiving dinner was loud and warm and abundant in the specific way of a family that cooks as an act of love. Diane cooked with the confidence of someone who considers the kitchen her domain and tolerates assistance selectively. Marisol was granted access on the grounds that she apparently knew what she was doing, which she did, and they worked side by side in the kitchen in the easy rhythm of 2 women who have independently decided to like each other. He talks about you, Diane said at one point, not looking up from the potatoes. He talks about Lily, Marisol said carefully. He talks about you, Diane repeated, with the calm certainty of someone who is not going to allow the distinction. He called me 2 weeks ago. First time he called just to talk in I don't know how long. Not about business, not about Lily's school schedule. He just called. She looked up. He talked about a bookstore in Savannah. Marisol was very still. He hasn't called like that since before Claire got sick, Diane said quietly. The warmth in her voice now had something more serious underneath it. I'm not pushing. I just want you to know what I see. She went back to the potatoes. He's still in there. He's just been very far down. Marisol said nothing. She was not yet ready to say anything. But she heard it, and she filed it in the place she kept things that mattered, and she finished chopping and didn't trust her expression. After dinner, after the children were finally down, Diane's husband steered Diane to bed with the practiced efficiency of a man who loves his wife and reads the room, and Everett and Marisol were left in the kitchen with the quiet and the remnants of a large meal and 2 glasses of wine that Diane had poured before disappearing. They cleaned up without discussion, falling into the easy division of a task they'd done together enough times that it required no coordination. The kitchen was warm and the house was asleep, and Chicago pressed its cold face against the windows. He handed her a dish. She dried it. She handed it back. He put it away. Ordinary. Completely ordinary. And then he stopped at the counter and didn't move, and the quality of his stillness was different from the working stillness, and she looked at him. "I need to say something," he said. His voice was quiet and very serious. "And I need you to know that I've thought about this carefully. About the position and the dynamic and what's appropriate. And I want to," he stopped, organized himself. "I want to be careful with you. That's the thing. I don't want to say this badly." She waited. He looked at her. Directly, completely, with nothing managed. "You walked into a house that had forgotten how to be warm," he said. "And you didn't try to fix it. You just were warm. You were yourself completely without asking anything back. And Lily?" His voice shifted slightly. "Lily came back to herself. And a breath. I came back to something I thought was gone." The kitchen was very quiet. "I know the timing is complicated," he said. "I know what I'm asking is complicated. But I think you know what I'm trying to say, and I think," his eyes on hers, steady and certain, "I think you've known for a while." She looked at him. At the man who had carried 3 years of careful grief and was standing in his sister's kitchen on Thanksgiving night, choosing, deliberately and fully, to set it down. "I have," she said. Simply, completely. "I just didn't think it was mine to say first." He crossed the kitchen. Not quickly. Deliberately, the way he did everything that mattered. He stopped in front of her and looked at her face. Reading it the way she'd seen him read Lily, with total attention, making sure. Then he reached out and took her hand. Just that. Her hand in his, in the warm kitchen, with Chicago outside and the house asleep around them. "Claire made me promise not to build a fortress," he said quietly. "I know," she said. "I think," his voice very low now, "I think this is me keeping it." She looked at their hands. Then at him. "Then keep it," she said. He brought her hand up and held it against his chest, over his heart, simply and completely, and they stood there in the warm kitchen in the sleeping house, not kissing, not rushing, just 2 people who have finally arrived at something they have been walking toward for a long time, standing still in it, letting it be real. Outside, Chicago did its cold and relentless thing. Inside, something that had been closed for 3 years opened all the way. He kept the promise. Tell us in the comments. Where were you when he took her hand? Because we completely lost it. Drop something below. They told Lily in the Outer Banks. Not because they'd planned it that way. Plans, Marisol had learned, had a particular way of dissolving around Lily, who had her father's instinct for the truth of things and a 6-year-old's complete immunity to diplomatic timing. But December had brought with it the quiet understanding that something had shifted, and Everett had suggested the Outer Banks the way he suggested the things that mattered most. Quietly, without ceremony, as if the idea had simply always been there waiting to be said out loud. A long weekend. The 3 of them. The off-season beach house his family had kept for years, empty in December. The kind of place that only becomes fully itself when the summer people have gone and the coast returns to its actual nature. Wide and wild and unhurried, the Atlantic doing its enormous patient thing against the sand. Lily had packed Professor and Gerald. Marisol had not commented on Gerald's inclusion. Some decisions were beyond negotiation. The drive down was 6 hours and felt like none of them. Lily held court from the back seat with the authority of someone who has decided this is the best day and intends to maximize it. Songs, stories, an elaborate game involving license plates that she invented and modified the rules of in real time whenever she was losing. Everett drove with the particular ease of a man who has somewhere to be and is not in a hurry to get there, and Marisol sat in the passenger seat and watched the American coast come up through the window and felt, with a completeness she had not felt in a very long time, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. At some point, Lily fell asleep. The car went quiet. The road went long. Outside, The coastal Carolina landscape did its flat, beautiful thing. Marsh grass and water and the enormous sky of the eastern seaboard in winter, gray and silver and full of light despite itself. Everett reached across the console and took her hand. He didn't look away from the road. She didn't either. They drove like that for an hour in the easy quiet of people who have stopped needing to fill the space between them. The beach house was gray-shingled and wide-porched, set back from the dunes, the kind of structure that looks like it grew there rather than was built. Inside it smelled of salt and wood and the particular closed-up warmth of a house waiting to be opened. Everett got the heat running. Lily immediately located the back porch and the path through the dunes to the water and had to be talked out of going directly to the beach in the dark. "Tomorrow," Everett said. "First thing." Lily negotiated. "First thing," he confirmed. Lily accepted these terms and went to find where Gerald would live for the weekend. They made dinner together in the beach house kitchen. Simple things, the groceries they'd stopped for on the way, nothing complicated. Lily sat on the counter and supervised with cheerful specificity. Everett cooked with the focused attention he brought to everything, and Marisol stood beside him, and they moved around each other in the warm kitchen with the ease of people who have found their rhythm and are not yet used to the joy of it, still slightly astonished each time it proves real. After dinner, after Lily was in bed with Professor and the star nightlight, Marisol had packed without thinking about it. Simply part of what she carried now, part of what was theirs. They sat on the back porch in the December dark with blankets and the sound of the Atlantic coming in through the dunes. The stars over the Outer Banks in winter are extraordinary. No city light for miles, the sky doing its full, unobstructed thing, the kind of night that makes the world feel simultaneously enormous and very intimate. They sat close enough that their shoulders touched. "She's going to know," Marisol said quietly. "She already knows," Everett said. "She's known longer than we have." Marisol thought about a little girl on a bed with a rabbit under her arm, delivering the truest sentence in the room with complete simplicity. "What do we tell her?" Marisol said. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the stars. "The truth," he said. "That's all she's ever needed from me." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. The Atlantic came in and went out in its ancient, unhurried rhythm. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Not a question." "I know," he said. "Neither am I." Morning came gray and cold and perfect. True to his word, Everett had Lily on the beach by 7:30. All three of them bundled to unreasonable degrees. Lily in a red coat that made her look like a very serious cardinal, running ahead of them toward the waterline with the pure physical joy of a child given an enormous beach and permission to use all of it. They walked behind her, close, their hands finding each other without discussion. Lily ran back to them at some point, breathless and bright-eyed, cheeks red from the cold, and stopped in front of them both. She looked at their hands. She looked up at her father, then at Marisol, then back at her father. The Atlantic came in behind her. "Are you going to keep her?" Lily asked her father, with the directness of someone for whom this is not a complicated question. Everett looked at Marisol. Something in his face completely open. No fortress, no careful distance, nothing held back. The face of a man who has come all the way back. "If she'll let me," he said. Lily turned to Marisol with those serious, knowing dark eyes. Marisol crouched down in the sand so they were level. She looked at this little girl, at the uneven pigtails, at Professor peeking out from her coat pocket, at the enormous loving heart that had been visible in every unguarded word she'd spoken since the very first day. "I came here for you, you know," Marisol said softly. "That's still true." "I know," Lily said. "But you can stay for both of us now." Marisol pulled her in. Lily's arms came around her neck with the complete, unguarded trust of a child who has decided and is not second-guessing it, and Marisol held her tight and felt Everett's hand come to rest on her back, warm and steady and certain, and the three of them stayed like that on the winter beach while the Atlantic did its patient, enormous thing around them. Lily pulled back first, looked at them both, then at the water. "Can I go in the waves?" she asked. "Absolutely not," Everett said. "What if just my feet?" "It's 40 degrees, Lily. Professor wants to see the waves." "Professor can see the waves from here." Lily considered this negotiation closed and ran back toward the water anyway, stopping just short of the foam with the calculated precision of someone who knows exactly where the line is. Everett shook his head, looked at Marisol. She was already smiling. He looked at her face, at the woman who had walked into his quiet, cold, carefully maintained life and simply been warm, without agenda, without performance, without asking anything back. And he felt, with a completeness he had not felt since before grief had become the weather he lived in, that the world was large and good and full of things worth staying for. He took her hand. She held it. Down the beach, Lily was telling the Atlantic something important. The wind carried her voice back to them in pieces, bright and clear and unhurried. The sound of a child who feels completely, entirely safe. The house behind them, the ocean before them, the winter sky going slowly, quietly gold. Family standing in the light. If the story found something in you, leave it in the comments. The ending, the beach, the moment Lily said, "You can stay for both of us now." Tell us which part stayed with you. We are here for every single word. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.